love you to death, and I want you to marry me. Jody. I'm sorry.
Like this video in the next 5 seconds, or you will wake up with a spider in your mouth tomorrow. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mind Hub. Ellen tries to make people think that she's sweet and nice, but if you ask her staff, they'll tell you a different story. Apparently, she hisses at writers when they displease her, and everyone who works for her is borderline terrified that the talk show host will end up berating them for anything that they do that doesn't totally please their boss. Ellen's also crossed a serious line with plenty of other people, and today we plan to highlight just how many times Ellen lost it with her guests. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Mind Hub. Also, comment Ellen and we'll give a lucky winner a shout out in the next video. 10. T.T. Pierce. Name shaming. T.T. Pierce wasn't all that happy with Ellen when her supposed jokes crossed the line in a big way. She ended up being so upset at the talk show host that she sued her, citing her reason as emotional distress. Ellen featured the real estate agent's ads on her show without her permission as part of one of her regular joke segments, and went out of her way to mispronounce TT's name so that it sounded like a pair of boobs. TT is actually the Nigerian word for flower and has nothing to do with anatomy. In fact, the name doesn't sound anything like the way Ellen said it, and TT was incensed that Ellen would go out of her way to toss her under the bus in front of a national TV audience. Ellen didn't even begin to consider what kind of damage her ill-informed joke would cause to TT's business, and she basically shamed her publicly. The company TT works for even called Ellen out for her little joke and made a point of mentioning how utterly disappointed they were. So it's no surprise that TT fired back, taking Warner Brothers Entertainment to court for a range of charges, including defamation, false light invasion of privacy, misappropriation of likeness, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We think that she's well within her rights to do so, and support her move because it's clear that Ellen crossed a serious line, going so far as to do it without even bothering to consult TT before blasting her name for everyone to poke fun at. 9. Proposal problems. Then there's the time that Ellen made things amazingly uncomfortable for her entire studio audience, featuring a couple of actors pretending to be a couple. Halfway through the show, the pair had the cameras turned on them, showing Jacob proposing to Jody and professing his undying love for her. The whole thing was a setup, of course, and Jody ended up bursting into tears, telling Jacob that she simply couldn't marry him. Jacob was actually a member of Ellen's production team and had been featured in a similar sketch a year prior to the episode in question. The audience had no clue about his affiliation with the show, however, and didn't realize that they were simply being pranked. They all got really excited about the faux proposal and then ended up shocked when things went terribly wrong for him. Some of them were so upset that they were unable to focus on the rest of the show and think that Ellen definitely went a little too far with her supposedly lighthearted pranks. One of the audience members had actually been turned down after a proposal to his then-girlfriend not too long before he decided to show up to watch the show, and the bit ended up causing some serious emotional distress for him. Sure, Ellen didn't mean to upset pretty much everyone in her audience, but any amount of forethought would make it clear that this wasn't a joke that she should have gone through with. 8. Mario Lopez undressed. Mario Lopez probably knows he's a bit of a sex symbol these days, and he's used to women putting their hands all over him, but he definitely didn't expect Ellen to fondle him partway through her show. But that's exactly what the handsy talk show host did, without his permission. Ellen thought she was being cute, but many people have said that what she did was totally inappropriate, and we have to agree. If the roles had been reversed, then we're sure she would have been incensed, but because she's Ellen, she thinks she's able to get away with this sort of borderline sexual harassment. The incident went down when Ellen brought up the fact that he was promoting a line of men's underwear at the time. Lopez said that he was proud of his new gig and that it was going really well for him. Without missing a beat, Ellen then proceeded to unbutton his pants, untuck his shirt, drop his zipper, and drop his pants in front of everyone, all to the surprise of her guest, who had no heads up that Ellen was going to try to take his pants off ahead of time. While Mario Lopez is probably no stranger to unwanted advances like that, he was understandably shocked by Ellen's move, and he definitely looked very uncomfortable about what went down. He definitely wasn't ready to bear all in front of her studio or TV audience, and we think that Ellen should really tone down her little pranks in the future, especially because we're sure she's totally aware that they make people feel awkward. As far as we know, that's the entire point, and that's totally uncalled for. If that's how she chooses to boast her ratings, she really should be ashamed of herself. Then again, it's Ellen, so she'll probably dig in her heels and refuse to admit any wrongdoing at all, mostly because she doesn't seem to give a damn who she offends. 7. Taylor Swift dressing room prank. Ellen has a habit of pranking guests on her show and doing her best to scare them while they're on stage. She took this one step further with Taylor Swift and took her scare pranks right to the pop star's dressing room, ambushing her before the show had even gotten underway. T-Swift seems to get this sort of treatment every time she appears on The Ellen Show, and we have to say that she takes the abuse fairly well, but we're sure that Ellen took things too far this time. The host went out of her way to hide in Taylor's dressing room bathroom, of all places, waiting until her guest showed up to get prepped before filming began, and then she pounced at her like a wild animal. Taylor was terrified by the unprovoked attack and ended up being so scared that she launched herself into a wall and then promptly fell to the floor in the fetal position, still trying to figure out what was going on. What makes this joke worse was that it took place in the bathroom of the dressing room, complete with cameras positioned with a clear view of the toilet, which has to be a ridiculous invasion of privacy. Putting hidden cameras in someone's bathroom would be enough for any of us to catch some kind of sexual assault charge and end up being labeled as a predator for the rest of our lives. Why Ellen thinks this sort of thing is okay is something that we can't even begin to figure out, and she's lucky that Swift didn't promptly sue her. Taylor's also lucky that she didn't end up being more embarrassed by the prank gone wrong, as she could have easily been caught with her pants down on the toilet without ever knowing that the entire scene was being filmed by Ellen and her crew. 6. Alison Sweeney push. Anyone who watches Ellen on a regular basis probably saw this incident go down while Ellen tried to make it look like fun and games. It definitely showed off her mean side in a big way. What she did pretty much amounts to premeditated assault, and she's lucky that nobody was seriously injured by her actions. When Alison Sweeney, who was featured on the reality TV show The Biggest Loser, showed up on the show, Ellen convinced her to play a game of giant Jenga. Sweeney thought that Ellen was ready to have some fun with her and got really excited to play. Unfortunately for her, Ellen knew the entire time that she was going to have some fun at Sweeney's expense and waited until the tower got really tall before making her move. When Sweeney was stretching to place a brick up at the top after a successful pull, Ellen calmly walked up behind her and pushed her into the tower, causing it and Sweeney to topple over and fall over the stage. Sweeney fell on the bricks, and it looks like she fell really hard, hurting herself in the process. We don't know why Ellen would do such a thing, and can only guess that it's because she's actually a miserable person deep down inside who gets satisfaction out of other people's pain. 5. Kim Burrell banned. One of the people that Ellen has banned from her show admittedly probably had it coming to her. This is the one time when Ellen lost it with a guest that we can sort of get on board with. And that's because Kim Burrell is an unashamed homophobe who said some pretty deplorable things leading up to her appearance on The Ellen Show. Ellen, it seems, is happy to play the aggressor, but doesn't have a very thick skin when it comes to personal slights against her. We get that, and we're not condoning Burrell's homophobic comments, but we would have thought that someone as nasty as Ellen wouldn't go out of her way to then shame Burrell even more by publicly stating why she banned her from the show. Then again, public shaming is what Ellen does best. While we support her move to call Burrell out for her homophobia, we still don't feel sorry for Ellen because she really is a deplorable person when all's said and done. 4. Shaming Nancy. Nancy was a guest on The Ellen Show who had no idea that her idol was such a bad person until she ended up being shamed by her in a big way. Ellen gives out gifts to all her audience members, seemingly in an attempt to make her think she's actually nice. That didn't work out so well for Nancy, who thought it would be okay to take more than one gift so that she could hook up a friend who was likewise a huge Ellen fan, but wasn't able to make it to the studio that day. We don't think that's all that odd, but it seems that Ellen was totally ready for this to happen with one of her guests at some point. In fact, Ellen had hidden cameras watching the gift table, and when she noticed Nancy taking more than one gift, she wasted no time rolling back the tapes for her entire audience, shocking Nancy when she went out of her way to bash her guest, who hadn't even realized she had done something wrong. Ignoring the fact that Ellen had cameras watching the gifts for the sole purpose of catching people taking more than one gift, we think it's ludicrous that she thinks it's okay to single out her audience member by getting on stage and pointing the finger at her halfway through her show. It's obvious that Ellen had been prepping for a moment like this for quite some time, and we can't help but be offended for poor Nancy with regard to Ellen's tactless and mean attempt to shame her in front of everyone in attendance at the show, along with everyone watching at home. Needless to say, Nancy wasn't too pleased and was embarrassed to the point where she was totally speechless and close to tears. 3. Kathy Griffin fiasco. Kathy Griffin was so upset by Ellen's actions that she went out of her way to say just how angry she was at her, albeit without naming names because she, unlike Ellen, was still happy to show a little tact when talking about people in public. Still, we all know that the talk show host with short blonde hair that she was referring to was, in fact, Ellen, and we think that her refusal to actually call her out by name just goes to show how much of a stand-up person Griffin is. Griffin mentioned how Ellen once blew up at her at the Emmys for no apparent reason when the two were backstage, literally kicking Kathy out of a backstage dressing room for what amounted to nothing at all. Griffin then went on to say that Ellen is known to have a serious mean streak and that most people steer clear of her because of it. It seems that Hollywood is totally aware of just how bad a person Ellen is, and we don't doubt that for a second. To make things worse, Ellen didn't waste any time calling Griffin up to personally berate her when she heard that she had potentially been outed, being so cruel that Griffin had to hang up the phone in tears because what Ellen said to her was so underhanded and mean. Ellen then went on to try to publicly shame Griffin, calling her out by name in a W magazine article and saying that Griffin was banned from her show, which just seems to be par for the course as far as Ellen is concerned. She just won't admit when she's crossed a line, and instead thinks it's okay to lash out viciously at anyone who tries to show people what a terrible person she really is. 2. Kareem Olympios' discomfort. A star of the hit show The Bachelor, Kareem Olympios was definitely taken aback when she showed up on The Ellen Show and later confirmed that Ellen made her feel very uncomfortable during their entire interview. She went on the show after being invited because she really thought Ellen was a good person, but has now changed her tune, admitting that Ellen is actually a pretty nasty person in general, who doesn't care who she hurts, just to make herself feel good. She wasn't even comfortable saying how uncomfortable Ellen made her feel before, during, and after their little chat, but finally admitted that Ellen was really mean to her. She said that ahead of the interview, Ellen wasn't her usual bubbly on-camera self and was actually very aggressive and very cold. That put her on the edge in a big way, especially when Ellen suddenly changed her tune during the interview, pretending to be super nice. After filming wrapped up, Ellen then sent Olympios packing, refusing to even acknowledge her presence any further. It seems to us like Ellen's happy demeanor is all just for show, and plenty of people would agree that she's definitely not as nice as she tries to make herself out to be when the cameras are rolling. 1. Caitlyn Jenner burn. Even though Ellen said that she supports Caitlyn Jenner's sex change move, she definitely had a go at shaming the celebrity on TV and went out of her way to make things super uncomfortable to the point where Kate went public to say just how offended she was by Ellen's uncalled-for attack on her character. Say what you will about Jenner, she's been a solid activist supporting transgender people in general, and her work has gone a long way towards making people feel okay about it. Still, Ellen decided to have a go at her with regard to her somewhat conservative political views in front of her entire audience. When she brought up Caitlyn's views on gay marriage, it was made clear that she only had Jenner on her show so that she could try to put her down in front of a national audience, and that's not a cool thing to do to anyone. Blindsided by the sudden turn of events, Jenner was noticeably surprised and really didn't know what to say other than to defend her views and make it clear that Ellen had crossed a line. Jenner then went on to publicly denounce Ellen for her actions, saying that she felt that Ellen burned her, pulling a bait and switch on her. She stated that Ellen treated her unfairly and deliberately tried to make her look bad. Ellen also made a point of mentioning to Howard Stern later on that Caitlyn didn't want to dance with her because she was a lesbian, which wasn't a thing and caused a lot of unnecessary grief for Jenner. Basically, she went out of her way to bash her for her admittedly controversial views, trying to make it out to be all fun and games. We hate to break it to you, Ellen, but publicly shaming people on national TV when they appear on your show out of respect for you isn't cool.